Well, good morning to each and every one of you, and welcome back to another wonderful Sunday school class. It's great to have you here with us today. I'm so thankful to each and every one of you for understanding the importance of me being out in the children's Sunday school to give them time for Sunday school as well. Thank you so very much also for joining us here today for this great experiment of what it could be like if I pre-recorded some Sunday school sessions. So just to give you again a quick rundown of what we're going to be doing is I will be trying to maintain as much interactiveness as possible. We'll be doing a little bit of lecture, and then scattered throughout we will have time for you all to talk and have discussion and to work through some questions and then come back into the video. And so hopefully this will be still as engaging and still bringing as much conversation as we can, and perhaps even more conversation onto the table for us. So we'll be doing recorded sessions, and as there's time for when the screen pops up with a big question for us or a question for discussion, you may want to, and I would strongly encourage that you pause the video or stop the video even, so that you have time to address that question well. If you do need anything, I am just a text message away, so I can take a moment or two to come down during the first few Sundays to either do some troubleshooting or to help out with anything that is needed. Other than content questions, I will ask that content questions, meaning questions regarding things in the biblical text or regarding different theology questions or things like that, or different inquiries, that you would simply write those down and then turn them into me maybe at the end of the Sunday or at the end of the month, so that then I can have time to work on the next Sunday school class and address all of those questions. So once again, thank you so very much for joining us. I definitely appreciate it. We do want to start off quite normally here with the sharing of prayer concerns and requests. So if you can at this time pause the video and begin to share your prayer concerns and prayer requests with one another, and have several people perhaps pray for each other's requests. There's no need for just one person to pray, but have several people pray for another person's requests. So if you would, go ahead and pause the video and begin to pray for each other now. Well, thank you so very much for praying for each other. We definitely appreciate it. Now, what we would like to do is begin to work through a psalm. And so if there's anybody in the room who's feeling led by the Holy Spirit to read a particular psalm, why don't you go ahead and do that? Otherwise, why don't you take some time and simply read why don't you read Psalm 90 to begin? So if you would, pause the video and go ahead and begin to read Psalm 90. All right. Well, thank you so much again for doing that, and thank you for being here with us. We appreciate that you read a psalm. What that does is that kind of sets us in the mood and sets us in the place and the frame of mind where we can then begin to dig into our Sunday school class material. So if you would, open your Bibles up to Daniel. I believe we're going to be in Daniel chapter 8 today. And so if you would, go ahead and move to Daniel chapter 8. What you will see on the screen in front of you, or what you should be seeing on the screen in front of you, is my Bible software program called Logos. This is an absolutely fantastic program and has many, many resources on it. It's a fantastic Bible study tool if you don't have it. I'll be using this Logos pretty extensively as we record the videos, and so you'll see it up here on the screen often. To begin, however, I do want to give you time to read through Daniel chapter 8, and I would encourage you to read Daniel chapter 8, verses 1 through 4. So if we can have one person, please go ahead and read Daniel chapter 8, verses 1 through 4, and pause the video at this time so that that reading can be done. Thank you. All right, thank you so very much for reading, whoever that was. So what we see here, or the first questions that we were addressing last week, was really some different things. First is the timestamp, right? So it says in the 3rd year. And let me go ahead and make this a little bit bigger for us and see if we can get a bigger font. Make sure everyone can read it on the screen. All right here it says, in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar. Remember that in Daniel chapter 7, we find that Daniel had the vision, I believe it was in the 1st year of the reign of Belshazzar. Yep, it's in the 1st year of reign of Belshazzar. Remember from Daniel chapter 6 that Belshazzar is going to be the last king of Babylon before Persia comes in and conquers. So we're remembering that kind of historical context. We remember in the 1st year, Daniel receives a vision. Then again, it's in Daniel chapter, in Daniel chapter 8, it's in the 3rd year of the reign. So you're thinking approximately somewhere along the line of 2 years pass. Now, some other details that we went ahead and began to talk about last week was that it was Daniel sees in the vision, and when I saw. So the context for the description of Daniel chapter 8 verses 1 through 4 is a context where Daniel is in a vision. His physical body is still in Babylon. His physical body is going to be near King Belshazzar. That's in Babylon, and yet he is going to appear somewhere else. He says, I was in Susa, the citadel. And we remember, from last week, we just mentioned this briefly, but Susa should really begin to trigger some things in us. And we remember, we remember Susa's in the book of Esther. That's the location of that story. As well as, I was just reading this past week in the book of Ezra. Ezra comes from the citadel of Susa. So where is it? Let's turn to our handy-dandy atlas. And let me see here if I can refresh this really quick. Please check the connection. Well, we have a different atlas here. I have a second one. The other one I was going to be trying to use was really ultimately very handy for being able to zoom in and things like that, which is helpful. But here's also a good map. This is from the Holman Bible Atlas, and so what you see here, you're going to be seeing the reign or the region of Canaan. This is including Israel, and you see Jerusalem is right over here. Where is Daniel now? Remember, Daniel is going to be way across the desert here in Babylon. That's where he is physically going to be located, is there in Babylon. This is the Babylonian kingdom. Now, just as a side note, since we have this handy-dandy atlas up, notice that the trade routes would have actually followed the rivers to a certain extent. And so the trade route would have gone this way, up above, and then down into Jerusalem, and up above the desert, and swinging around and coming down into Babylon. So when you're thinking about the exile, you're thinking about the people from Jerusalem going this way. And when you're thinking about the return from exile, you're also thinking about the return coming something like this way, right? And so you're thinking of coming up and above this massive, more or less in the day, impenetrable desert. All right, so you're in the Babylonian kingdom. Now, that's where Daniel is physically located, but remember what he sees in Daniel chapter 7 what he sees, when I saw, I was in Susa, the citadel, which is in the province of Elam. So we're looking over here, and we're going to be looking even further east across the way. Boom. This is Susa, and this is Elam, and this is going to be all part of the Persian Empire. All right, so here's Susa. Again, here's Babylon. And way over here then is Jerusalem. Just as a quick information, here of course is going to be Assyria in this region, and down here of course is going to be the realm of Egypt. And so you have that kind of mental picture and description of where we are. So in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, which when I saw, I was in Susa, the citadel, the province of Elam. So we've talked about the timestamp. We've also then talked about where the vision is. Now what we need to do is think about the rest of this vision, specifically in verses 3 through 4. And so what I want to do here is I simply want to pause and allow you to discuss and talk with yourselves, what is the description of the ram? Now remember, our goal here is not to move too quickly. We are going to get to interpretation, because in the text itself, in Daniel chapter 8 verse 15, we'll actually see the interpretation of the vision. So for right now, when we're studying, what we want to do is go slowly. We just want to talk about the ram and what the text says the ram is like. So our question for you, we'll pause the video here at this time. What are some of the features of the ram that are described in verses 3 and 4? Let's pause the video at this time, talk about verses 3 and 4. All right, so we're now picking back up in the video, and I thank you so very much for doing so. I hope that was some good discussion. Hope that you saw some different features of the ram. Just to make sure we hit some of the highlights, remember that the ram is standing on the bank of the canal. Remember, we're in Persia. Has 2 horns. Both horns were higher, but one was higher than the other. Okay, so you're imagining one horn is coming up high, but the other is actually higher than the other. And we come up and see the ram charging. No one can stand before him. He did as he pleased, and he became great. So one of the things then that we probably want to think about is what this ram may have looked like. And let's see if I can get it. There we go. So here's just a picture actually from the Persian Empire. It's a golden ram. Here's what a picture of the head of the ram may have looked like. Okay. Now it may look like something like this. I think I have another image of a ram here as well. Nope. That's going to be the interpretation. And that's the goat. So you're thinking about something like this for the ram. The ram horns may have been sticking straight up, or maybe they curved and came up. Something like that. You have maybe the great curve, and maybe they curved around and upwards, with one then appearing higher than the other. But you're having something like this. Okay, so you have something like this in mind. Obviously not gold, it would have been a real ram, but again, just the shape of the head and things like that would have been from there. If you're being a student at the moment, you'll probably also see this reading the subtitle from the Holman Bible Handbook. It says, in antiquity, the ram was a symbol of the Persian Empire. Shown above is a golden ram's head dating from the Persian period. And so already we're like, all right, when we're expecting the interpretation, we're going to expect the ram to be the Persian Empire. And again, it's almost already given away in verses 1 through 2, because when Daniel sees, he's in Susa, which is part of the Persian Empire. It's actually going to be one of the major fortifications in the capital of the Persian Empire. And so we're thinking about Persia then at this moment. Now, there are some other features of the text that I want to share with you and talk with you about here for today. And so one of the features of the text is going to be right here at the end. Take a look. First, when I saw the ram charging westward, northward, and southward, what does that mean? It means that in all directions, seemingly in the four regions of the compass, right, the four arrows of the compass, in all directions, the Persian Empire is great, wielding great power, and is basically unstoppable. There's nothing to stop the Persian Empire at this moment. And then it says, he did as he pleased and became great. John Goldingay has a help in his Word Biblical Commentary on page 420, has a really helpful description for us, and it says this: the expression great is only unequivocally good when used of God. So the expression he became great or great, it's only unequivocally good when used of God. So we have this sense that, all right, so he's great. There may be some goodness with the Persian Empire, but it's not going to be completely pure or good. There's going to be some sin involved there. There's going to be some nuance of evil involved there as well. And so you have that expression. So now would be the time to, again, start to pause the video and generate any questions or any comments that you may have on the text. Go ahead and share with one another what you may be thinking about, and talk with one another. Thank you. All right, now we're coming back from the video, or to the video. Thank you so much for your questions. Again, if there's a recorder, or if somebody is interested enough just to text me their question or call me with their question or their comment, please make sure to do so, and then we can bring that back for the next Sunday school session. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and begin to move into the next section. Remember, we're not dealing with interpretation yet. We are still in the realm of just seeing what the text is saying and has for us. So now the next section that we should be reading is probably verses 5 through 8. So if I could have the video paused and have one person read verses 5 through 8, we'll then begin to delve into the next part of the vision. Again, if one person could please read for us verses 5 through 8. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so very much for reading. We definitely appreciate it. Now what we want to do is we want to focus in again on the second thing. And what's happening here is, in the vision, of course, Daniel is seeing a goat come across from the west, across the face of the whole earth without touching the ground. Again, that touching the ground gives it a sense of mystery, sense of the supernatural, but just a sense also of the utter swiftness of this particular goat. It's moving incredibly fast, so much so that its feet aren't touching the ground. You know, it's almost like an airplane in that regard. Not way up high like that, but just it gives it that swiftness not to have to touch the ground. Some images here that we have then of the goat are things like this. Okay, and again, I'm going to zoom in for us, see if I can't get a better picture. Okay, so this is a wild goat from the images from the Illustrated Bible Treasury. And so this is just a picture of the wild goat, and you see this massive types of horns on it, and to give a bit of an impression of what it might have looked like in the vision. Again, here's another picture, and I'm going to zoom way in on this one. There we go. This is an ibex, which is often referred to as a wild goat. Here we have it, instead of a drawing or an illustration, we actually have a live picture. Here's what you see, that you can even tell from the picture. I mean, this thing has massive, thick horns, and they're long, and where the rams kind of curved in and maybe then came around, or maybe the ram in the vision was coming straight up. You see how closely it curves around to the ear, or maybe in the vision it was expressing that it's straight up. Here you just see the mighty power of these things with the long curve. I mean, these things are very strong horns. And so this is a bit of what we might conceptualize or think of as what Daniel is seeing. He's seeing something like this charging out of the west, without touching the ground, right? It's with its feet without touching the ground. What else? It says he came to the ram with 2 horns. I missed one thing. And the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. So there's something, again, just different. There's something a little supernatural. The goat, again, has the 2 horns, but then it's going to have just a kind of an interesting conspicuous horn coming out between the 2 eyes. When I'm thinking of this, I almost think of like a unicorn. It's something like that added into the goat. It's just a horn of some sort right there on the forehead. He came to the ram with 2 horns, and he runs at it in powerful wrath, comes close to the horn, or close to the ram, is enraged and struck the ram and broke his 2 horns. The ram had no power. He was cast down and trampled. No one to rescue the ram. The goat became exceedingly great, but when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and instead of it there came up 4 conspicuous horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. Again, so remember, this is a vision. It's supernatural. Maybe there was no 2 horns on this goat. Maybe there's just 1 great horn, like a unicorn, mighty and powerful. Then it gets broken off, and instead there's 4 horns. Then, I'm sorry, I had 8. Right? There's 4 horns then coming up out of the goat's head. So again, this is a vision, and it's meant to communicate and tell us something about this Greek Empire. Let's see here. All right. I just wanted to share this from John Goldingay in his Word Biblical Commentary. On page 420, he says this: goats are fierce, more powerful than sheep. Right? And so that's something that maybe we wouldn't have known, or maybe we didn't know, or maybe we did know it. And so that's kind of the goat, and that's what's going on here. Again, we're gonna wait just a little bit on the interpretation, because that's going to come when we're moving over the next series of verses. Let's pause the video, though, at this point and just take or ask any questions you may have, or any additional insights or comments that you want to share with one another. All right, let's move on. What we're going to try to do is finish up one last section today. And so if we can, please read for us verses, or if we can, have one person pause the video, and we'll read through verses 9 through 14. So if one person could please pause the video and read through verses 9 through 14, that would be great. Thank you. All right. Thank you so very much for reading. Definitely appreciate it. So again, the first thing that we want to do is really ask you, what are some things that are of import in the text that you see? So we'll pause the video here and have you share with one another maybe just 2 or 3 things that you see popping out of the text that maybe you think are important or that you see as important? Thank you so much for sharing. Now, there are some things that I would like to point out in the text here for us. So the first is, look at this. Out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. Remember that we've just seen a little horn actually in the fourth beast of the previous vision in Daniel chapter 7. And we said that that was Antiochus. And so we do want to keep that in mind as we go forward. And it was Antiochus the fourth, and that character was also a type of the Antichrist. It was a model, so to speak, we might use. It was a prophecy in action, we might say, of Antiochus the fourth. And so we do want to simply point that out, that, all right, we're seeing some similarities. We're going to be able to ping these back together and piece them back together as we move into the interpretation section. Notice that this little horn is not great everywhere. Right? In chapter 8, this little horn is great towards the south, towards the east, and towards the glorious land, which of course is going to be the Holy Land. If we went back to our Bible Atlas, again, the east, you're thinking in this direction, you're thinking south, and again, you're thinking the Holy Land, which is going to be in the land of Canaan in this region. So it's not this horn does not have control over the whole world in Daniel 8. It's only sections of whatever empire that was there, which we'll see in the interpretation that empire is going to be Greece. Notice here it then says it grew great even to the host of heaven. Some of the host and some of the stars it threw down to the ground and trampled them. So this is fascinating. We're going to take a look at this more in depth as we move into the interpretation. But again, this is something important that we need to bring out of the text and say, all right, we need to think about this. Became great, even as great as the prince of the host. Let me double check and make sure we deal with that in the interpretation section here, because otherwise we need to talk about that. Okay, shall even rise up against the prince of princes in the interpretation section. I think then that we can probably talk about this in either place. Here, the prince of the host. Remember, the host in the Old Testament, especially in this sort of context with stars, is going to really be indicating the heavenly host, which could be the host of saints, as well as it could be just the host of all the spiritual beings and the saints, or the saints, right? It could be either. That's included in the army of God, right? So that's included in the heavenly host. Remember that very often in the Old Testament, the Lord is called the Lord of hosts, right? And so we could even search for that right now. And so I could give you a reference or two. Whoops. All right. Lord of hosts. Fuzzy search. Yep, so here it is, and I'll enlarge the screen for you. What you see here is places like Zechariah 3:10, Lord of hosts, Isaiah 8:13, Lord of hosts, Romans 9:29, Lord of hosts, 1 Samuel, James, Zechariah. I mean, right, there's a whole bunch of references to God being the God, meaning Lord of hosts. So when you then come back to something like Daniel chapter 8 verse 11 and you see the prince of the host, what we're really going to be indicating here or referencing back to is something like Joshua. So let me pinpoint that verse for us here up on the screen. Joshua 5:13. when you come to something like Joshua 5:13, let me make sure it should be big enough, but let me make sure it's big enough for everybody. It says this: when Joshua was by Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and looked. Behold, a man was standing before him with his drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went to him and said, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" And he said, "No, but I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come." And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped him and said, "What does my Lord say to his servant?" And the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, "Take off your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. Now, again, the importance of the Joshua text is to help us pinpoint who this is. And this person is really Jesus. It's the second person of the Trinity. It's not Yahweh seated on the throne. It's not the Father. It's a second figure who is receiving worship and declaring the ground that he is standing on as holy in a manner that is meant to help us remember the burning bush. Right? When Moses approaches the burning bush, the angel of the Lord is in the fire, or Yahweh is in the fire. He hears Yahweh. He hears God speaking. Okay? And he says, Moses, Moses, take off your sandals, for where you're standing is holy ground. The place you're standing is holy ground. And it's the same sort of indication here. There is worship, holy ground to this figure who's clearly standing and is a man with a sword drawn, right? This is the prefiguring of Jesus. This is Jesus Christ in the flesh, all right? Before he was incarnate as a baby. And so this is the second person of the Trinity. And the important part here is then to see he's the commander of the Lord's army. Now I'm going to dare to do this real quick, and we're just going to highlight this word commander. Whoop. That was too much information for us. Commander, you see here on the screen, hopefully that it's sar, okay, and it's the Hebrew word. You see the lemma. Let's go back to Daniel and see if it's that same lemma there, or the same root word. Daniel 8:9, the prince. Okay, look at that. Whoops, too much information. I'm sorry about the double click. Look at that word prince. Look here. You see the Hebrew sar, right? Commander, prince. The word sort of, and here it is, actually has on the screen for us. The sense of the word is ruler, okay? It's a ruler in a position. So you have the same words there in Hebrew. It's meant to connect the dots, all right? And so this person who's rising up against the prince of the host is somebody who's rising up against God himself, rising up against the second person of the Trinity, rising up in order to make assault on the throne of God, right? That's what's happening. This person is really trying to take the worship of, take the glory of, take the position of God, which is why, again, this person is, remember from Daniel chapter 7, is going to be Antiochus, makes such a type of the Antichrist to come, because he has that same sort of role. All right, so I did want to point that out for us. Again, who is the prince of the host? It's Jesus Christ. Okay. Notice the regular burnt offering was taken away, the place of his sanctuary overthrown. Again, that's talking about what's going to be happening in the temple. We'll come back to that in the interpretation. And I see, again, I'm probably running out of time here, or based on the conversation, we may be really short on time, or we may still have a long ways to go. But just remembering again from Daniel chapter 7, right there at the end, if we came across Daniel chapter 7, verse 25, and I'll bring it up on the screen for us here. Daniel 7:25, he shall speak words against the Most High, shall wear out the saints of the Most High, shall think to change the times and the law, they shall be given into his hand, right? That's kind of that reference to changing the sacrifices, changing the religious festivals, that sort of thing. And you see it then coming out clearly here in Daniel 8, chapter 9, the regular burnt offerings tossed out. Verse 13. What do we see here that's important? Remember that it's simply not going to be forever. Okay? He said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful state. How long is 2,300 evenings and mornings? The best way to take this is simply to understand it in a natural way as one unit. So it would be something like 2,300 days. And so you're looking at something like that, 2,300 days. So it's going to be several years of time that this is going on, for the desolation of the sanctuary to then the point where it is finally restored and purified. All right. So now, if there is time left, and remember, if it's about 9:20, we should begin. 10:20. If it's about 10:20, we should begin to head upstairs and turn off the video. But if not, now is the great time to turn off or to pause the video to take any questions or concerns that you may have. Pause the video. Any questions, comments, or concerns that you may have, or any other insights that you wish to share with one another. All right. Well, thank you so very much for all coming today. I hope to see you upstairs for the session. Remember, if we still have time and you're still listening to this, remember just to give this a few weeks. Give it like 6 to 10 weeks, maybe a month, 2 months, 2.5 months, just to get a feel of how this is going and how this will work. Let us work out some kinks. If you have some suggestions or feedback, go ahead and give that to me. If you would prefer the video not to be stopped, you just want me to lecture for 30, 40 minutes, and then you guys can talk about the lecture. Tell me if that's something that you would prefer. Tell me if you'd like something different. But give us some time to adjust. Give us some time to work out any kinks that there may be. Give us some time to just settle into this new way of doing Sunday school, and we'll go from there. Hey, thank you so much again. We'll see you upstairs. God bless.